You're watching The Gist on Stat News Global. I'm Ramananda Sengupta. Today, we're going to be discussing how the Indian and the Jewish diasporas in the US view incoming President Donald Trump's second term in the White House. And joining me from Washington are Mr. Khanderao Kand, President of the Foundation for India and Indian Diaspora Studies, and Mr. Nissim Reuben, Assistant Director, Asia of the American Jewish Committee. Thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to speak to you, and I look forward to an interesting conversation.
Thank you,
Let me
Raman.
start with Mr. Kant. Mr. Kant, there seems to be sort of a impression that there was a time when most of the diaspora used to support well, I think they used to support both sides just to play safe, but there was a time when they were mostly seen as pro-democrat. How has this thing changed now?
So there is a last for 4 years, if you see that there is a though the diaspora is doing very good, highest income per capita income, education, and various sector, technology, medical, businesses, and etc. In general, diaspora is in well condition. However, when diaspora when looks at the both from US India point of view and also the state of things in USA related to Indian Americans, few things observed. That one is that there has been a constant campaign against Indian, either Indian Americans or India specific, like say matters related to CAA, farmers, many other things where some cities or etc. having resolutions for out of context and without even merit. There was false propaganda that genocide is happening in India, which billboards like presenting in Chicago or something. There is also in when it comes to the United States itself, there were earlier last year 2024 there were some attacks on religious places. There was also some sort of a attack on Indian consulate, and those things were not addressed. When it comes to Indian diaspora, when it is active, looks around, there are incidences like what happened in Bangladesh, religious minorities, or even Afghanistan, Pakistan, and somehow there was a I want to be more adventurous to say support, but there is a silence against those things. When diaspora itself was a well in condition, when diaspora looks at as a more global affinity towards the Indian diaspora, felt that Indian diaspora is being unfairly treated by a certain segment of the Democratic Party, and that started little bit resentment and transition from those who were much more activist or local looking into the global affairs and Indian affairs, that shifting from the Democrats to the Republican mindset.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So what you're essentially saying is that, for a long time, of course, we all used to believe that the Indian diaspora is punching way above its weight in some ways, and that, the typical idea that how would I say, thing of, the Indian typically being a cab driver in New York or something is no longer there. Now we are seen as IT specialists and things like that. So there is a lot more, a financial and other political clout from the Indian side.
Definitely.
Mr. Rubin, um, could you tell us a little bit about the coordination that seems to be taking place between the Indian diaspora and the Jewish diaspora? Because I think there's a lot of talk happening between the two diasporas in that sense. If you could just put that into a nutshell for me.
Sure. So, at the American Jewish Committee, we have taken a leadership role on outreach to India and the Indian American diaspora. And Mr. Khanderao Kand and FIIDS are one of our closest community partners. Since the 2002, when I came to the United States, I've started working with AJC since 2003. We organized the first ever US-India-Israel event on Capitol Hill in 2003. Between 2005 and 2008, HAC supported the US-India Civil Nuclear Agreement that laid the foundation for today's deep strategic ties between the US and India. And we should credit President George Bush for that. Over the years, the Jewish community and the Indian community have bonded robustly at a personal level. If you go to the nation's medical schools, business schools, law schools, you'll find that Jews are the largest ethnic community and Indians are the second largest ethnic community. Same is the case of Google, Amazon, where lots of Indian and Jewish and Israeli engineers and tech leaders work together and across the nation. So the bond is also because of our common family values of education, focus on family, focus on respect for elders, and especially for the Jewish community, something very emotional. I'm sure you all are aware happened since October 7, 2023, the Hamas terror attacks on Israel. In the United States and around the world, especially in Western capitals such as Canada, UK, Australia, there have been vigorous protests against Israel, but also against the Jewish community, anti-Semitic protests. And it is only the Indian diaspora that came out vocally in support of the Jewish community. That is something that is noticed, appreciated, and we very much look forward to furthering this partnership. The opportunity to promote Abraham Accords, US-India partnerships in the Middle East, Israel's integration in the Middle East, bringing peace to the Middle East. I think India is a vital partner of the United States. And now we have the current India caucus co-chair, Mike Waltz, becoming the National Security Advisor, and Senator Marco Rubio. Both are robust supporters of US-India and US-Israel relations. So I think we are going to see very consequential and successful years in the coming years in terms of the US Middle East relations.
That's very interesting because even in India, there seems to be this very strong sort of, bonding and sentiment, pro-Israeli kind of a thing, which you don't see anywhere else in South Asia, to be honest. I mean, it's only India that seems to be doing, having
If I
that
may
kind of a
ask,
thing.
to what you said, if I may add to what you said, in 2009, the Israeli Foreign Ministry conducted a poll, worldwide poll, which found that the United States India has the highest number of supporters for Israel. At 58% of Indians were robustly pro-Israel. United States came number 2 at 56%. And then other countries, Russia came at like 54%. But India is the most the people of India are the most pro-Israel in the world, not only in South Asia. Thank you.
This is an interesting fact to know. Mr. Khan, just a quick question. It's always bothered me. Do you think part of this last administration's problems with India stem from that Howdy Modi event where Mr. Modi went out and said, Ab ki baar Trump Sarkar, or, things like that? Do you think a lot of resentment
The
was
first
growing
thing
from
that
there,
let
or was it
me
from earlier?
correct that I was in the event and Modi ji never said that ab ki baar Trump Sarkar, and that is for the record. That's one thing. Second thing that uh, by and large it might have been little bit on the Democrat supporters, but administration was not against, in a way that Biden was much more centrist because he has been there in the politics for 50 years of this one, so he was centrist. And also, President Biden carried forward President Trump's policies, particularly South Asia and Indo-Pacific. It has been remarkable. There was friction around India's position on the Ukraine. That is for sure. But it was nothing to do with Howdy Modi. President Biden actually did the historic welcome in 2023 at the White House, and I was there in that and some of these events and etc. It was a historic in the Congress and etc. However, there was since the policies of Modi 2.0, that is the second term, they were much more coinciding with much more policy shifts, whether they were not the business as usual, whether it comes to Article 370 or it is comes to Ram Mandir or etc. The extreme liberal, where it actually in United States is a paradigm shift was happening, was the radicalization of the left and the nexus between the some of the Islamic entities with that. Uh, that had a influence on the certain segment of the democratic operators, while the White House itself, and if you look at the State Department, but Anthony Blinken and etc., there was a marvelous relationship between external minister Jaishankar ji and others, and good coordination actually the last few years. But there was a particularly Democratic Party, some certain segment, the ultra progressive segment, they had active campaign against India, but it was nothing to do with the how the Modi, but it was a lot of things about the policies and the nexus between the few entities, whether it sometimes we thinks or suspect Pakistan's role, or no, definitely, but Islamic agencies, the liberal extremes, also some of the extreme Khalistani separatists, there was a nexus was emerging, and they had a constant campaign against India, not just Modi in general, but India in specific. And that had impacted a lot of this resentment. But the policy of the administration, at least in the first 3 years, was not the surprisingly what happened after the whole the defeat of Kamala Harris. There are certain things immediately, I think that the post that actions were much more worrisome. Like for example, F-16 granting to Pakistan happened later on. There were a lot of rush thing was happening, like say billions of dollars were given to Ukraine, or even if you look at it, so left liberal extreme agenda has suddenly surfaced. That also shows that underlying bias against certain India or the certain element of the global stage.
That's kind of deep insight to the whole thing, because there's a the impression here seems to be that it's mainly because of that how the Modi event, there are a lot of people hold resentment. But I guess you're right, because it's been policies have been rather, I mean, distracting in some ways for Indians.
So one
Mr.
of the one
Reuben,
I can call out that under President Biden's and actually NSA and NSA, both countries' leadership, ISET is one of the most instrumental initiative came up. Also, IMEC, that is the India Middle East corridor. So these are the two initiatives happened in last government that needs to be carried forward.
I see. Mr. Reuben, before I sort of come down to the Jewish diaspora itself, I remember that there was a bit of a row. I think what 2015 or something. I think 2015, when Donald Trump told people that the people who vote for Democrats are not Jews, and he was trying to sort of, there was a bit of a row over that, if I remember. I'm not sure about, yeah, it was 2015 when he said that you need to control your politicians, and anybody who votes for the Democrats are very disloyal to Israel. So basically, I think he was trying to play the community against itself. Does that still hold?
Well, the Jewish community, like other communities, votes according to priorities, domestic and international. But domestic priorities take a precedence in the Jewish community. So traditionally, the community has been voting 80% Democrat, 20% Republican. Indian diaspora also had similar numbers. Now it has come down to about 60% Democrat and 40% Republican. This time around, because of the unfortunate developments post October 7th Hamas attacks on Israel, the Jewish vote was about 69% for Kamala Harris and 31% for the Republican Party. Although a lot of significant donors of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are Jewish. So the community votes according to its traditions. At the same time, I
Yes.
don't know if the politicians play, from both sides, they play to the community's sentiments. I should also point out that when you mentioned about Prime Minister Modi, Howdy Modi, that we should credit Prime Minister Modi for building that robust personal touch, whether it started with President Obama, then carried on to President Trump, then carried on to President Biden, and finally now again restarting with President Trump again. There's a background behind that. President Trump comes from Delaware, and many 7-Elevens and small businesses are owned by Indians. Many of them Gujarati, from my home state of Gujarat. President Biden had this attachment because wherever he would go for a morning cup of coffee, and it would be an Indian-owned, gas station, grocery store. So that was his, and then if you remember, as Senate Foreign Relations Chairman, he shepherded the U.S.-India nuclear deal to its completion. So and you could see that he would hold Prime Minister Modi's hand and walk into his house and all that. And the President, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who is Jewish, and Foreign Minister Jaishankar, you should credit Foreign Minister Jaishankar for that personal friendship that he built in the Obama administration when he was ambassador and Secretary Blinken was Deputy Secretary of State. That personal friendships carried forward to the robust US-India ties, despite rumblings in the Democratic Party or some sections of the Democratic Party against US-India relations. So I think that this credit definitely goes to Prime Minister Modi, is that the warm personal touch that he builds with world leaders is what you can see that in when he goes to the Middle East, when he goes to Israel, when he went to Israel, when he went to Russia, when he went to Ukraine, right? The personal touch that it brings is unmatched. Thank you.
We just have about 5 or 7 more minutes. Let me close with a common question for both of you, and I'd ask Mr. Khan to start first. The two lobbies that we are talking about here, okay, I won't call them lobbies, the two communities that we are talking about here are probably among the two most powerful sort of diaspora in the US now. I'm not including the Chinese in this. I'm sure they have their own lobby as well. But what do you think are going to be the main challenges or the main areas where you will need to put in a lot of effort to,
So first thing that
make things right?
I think the optics are very good. Some of the appointees, for example, Senator Marco Rubio or Congressman Mike Waltz, ex-Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard or Vivek Ramaswamy and even Elon Musk, they have been pro-India and understands Indian diaspora and in general Hindus. So that's optics are good. Also, President Trump is very decisive. He has a direct touch with the international leaders, including Prime Minister Modi. So he will be, and just by look at it, that just by his anticipated the arrival and inauguration and the policies, the Israel long-term 1.5 years, the issue was the war is just lingering around, and it is kind of settled. So there are a lot on international stage. There are a lot of things are going to be decisive. US-India relations in Indo-Pacific and in general going to be flourished. There are certain areas are going to be something that we need to work on. I mentioned about initiative for critical and emerging technologies, which was launched in the last administration, which is very important from the US-India partnership point of view, science and technology. So that we will have to work, make sure that it is not getting cancelled or in terms of the executive orders or etc. There is also few things that major defense partnership to India, that is something that need to be ratified. IMEC is another thing that initiative, the Middle East corridor, which actually fit into President Trump's policies. We need to surface that because he's trying to do that, make sure that America's interests are protected in the Panama Canal. And actually, IMEC investment in the IMEC is going to be a better solution and alternative, and then it will hedge all the Chinese dominance happening in the Panama region. So we'll have to work on that. We'll also have to work on the making sure that in the drive against the illegal undocumented immigration, that doesn't spill over the tech immigration or the H1Bs and the legal immigration. That is one of the concerns that we have. So we'll have to continue to work towards that aspect to create the awareness and do the advocacy towards that thing. So there are certain elements, and we may expect that certain friction happen on the trader. I don't think that it is going to be major, because India is really emerging as the third largest economy in the world, and that the business between the India and US and India is going to be flourishing. But if such kind of friction happen, we would like to play a role to make sure that there is a win-win situation over there and frictionless trades continues.
Mhm. Mr. Reuben, before you start, I just want to know that, how, I mean, part of your answer should include how much is the events in Israel right now going to be a factor
The
in the amount of, things that you will have to work with.
President Trump appointed Steve Witkoff as the special envoy for the Middle East, the same role that Jared Kushner had in the first Trump administration. And Mr. Steve Witkoff is also Jewish. So the support for Israel will be robust, and Israel's safety and security. At the same time, the focus will be on expansion of the Abraham Accords, uh, Israel's integration into the Middle East and the wider world. So we should expect in the near future to see more countries signing on to the Abraham Accords. Indonesia is the world's largest Muslim majority country. There are many others. What Mr. Khanderao said, that the IMEC, India Middle East Economic Corridor, it is critical not only for the United States, it is critical for India. Look what happened during the last 1 year. The Red Sea passage was closed, could not use the Suez Canal. The Indian ships had to go around the Horn of Africa, adding to insurance shipping costs on a wafer thin, profit margin. So that corridor will really open up. It will, as Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman said, it will save 6 days of transit between Asia and Europe. And Indian ports will benefit because they will be, shipping all the goods to the UAE, and then not only be a rail line but also a hydrogen gas pipeline, telecom cable laid parallel to the rail lines. And it will go from where? It will go from Haifa, which is an Indian-owned port. It's owned by Adani of India. And from Haifa to Piraeus, and from Piraeus shipped by rail to Europe. So the IMEC is critical for United States. It's not an Israeli project; it's a global project. And I think President Trump and Secretary Marco Rubio and NSA Mike Waltz will give tremendous push to IMEC, to I2U2, India, Israel, UAE, US, the official partnership, and we should remember commend the United Arab Emirates that despite this last year's situation, there are no American or European flights currently going to Israel, but Emirates and Etihad and FIIDS Dubai kept flying to Israel, even when Israeli airlines were not flying to Dubai. So we should credit that they have held on to the Abraham Accords, and we should give them tremendous credit for that. Thank you.
That's again a very interesting insight, because I suspect IMEC, as you said, is important to both India and Israel in many ways, and in some
And USA.
aspect.
And Asia,
Yes.
and the wider the global trade, it is a vital link. What is the alternative? Right? That IMEC would pass through Syria and go to Turkey. I'm not sure Turkey is a friend of India, but
I'm not sure
Israel
Turkey is
is.
a friend of anybody in many ways, but that's a different story. With that, unfortunately, we'll have to call this particular interview, to an end. Although I do hope to have you both again very sometime soon, once Mr. Trump is, firmly in the saddle, as it were. I suspect that both of you have already laid out your plans, and unfortunately, given Mr. Trump's unpredictability, you never know where the next curveball is going to come from.
So one thing that
So,
I would say, that Trump 2.0, Trump is a very changed person. Like we can notice
mhm,
that from Trump 1.0 to Trump 2.0, the kind of the tag of unpredictability of the first term. I don't think that if you really look at it, his campaign was very well disciplined, and he really stayed within the lane, and that really helped him to win. So I would say that he would continue the path. He is very focused. His team is very focused. one important thing that I would like to highlight in the conclusion, see, External Minister Dr. Jaishankar is in town, and new Secretary of State Marco Rubio's first bilateral international meeting is with India with him. And first, any alliance related, any international alliance of United States, that related meeting is Quad. Both are related to India, and that really shows a significance important that this administration will give and the priority to the US-India relations and the global affairs.
Well, since you brought that up, I'll just quickly end with Mr. Reuben. Mr. Reuben, I think last year Mr. Jaishankar met the committee members.
American
Would
Jewish
you like to
Committee,
give
yes.
us-
So every
if you could
year we come
discuss
to India, and Dr. Jaishankar hosted us at his office. Again, we met him in January. Again, we met him in December last month. And that
Mhm.
goes to show the sincere commitment on his part and on part of Dr. Jaishankar and part of Prime Minister Modi towards a robust US-India and India-Israel partnership. And for us in the Jewish community, it is very critical that friends and partners like Mr. Khanderao Kand work with us. Every year, I should credit him that he hosts the largest Indian American day-long advocacy day on Capitol Hill, which ends with an evening reception where members of Congress from both Democratic and Republican parties are invited. And my mentor, Jason Isaacson, and myself are invited. And Mr. Khanderao Khan inserts in that evening reception a conversation on IMEC and I2U2 and why it is critical for US and India to work together in the Middle East with Israel, with our Arab partners. So I've worked with many Indian American partners and organizations over the years, but I have seen that over the last couple of years, Mr. Khan has organized, as I said, the largest gathering of Indian American activists on Capitol Hill,
Thank you.
which I should credit him for, and looking forward to. Also, I have a personal affinity. I'm a Marathi Jew. I'm a Bnei Israel from the Mumbai area, so we have a common language. I speak Marathi with him. I speak Gujarati with Prime
Okay.
Minister Modi. So,
Mhm.
so the personal
That
affinity
explains a lot
also.
of the, goodwill that exists between the two countries.
Sure. Yeah.
With that, unfortunately, we must bring this particular interview to a close. Thank you so very much for joining us, gentlemen. I appreciate your taking time out, and more importantly, I appreciate the very lucid and clear ways in which you put all this together without, I think I've been fumbling more than you people have in many ways in the questions. Thank you so much again, and I look forward to having you with us again.
Thank you,
Namaste.
and
Shalom.
thanks for having us.
That was Mr. Khanderao Kand and Mr. Nissim Reuben talking to us from Washington about the diaspora and how it is reacting to the ascension of Mr. Donald Trump to the White House for his second term. I do hope you enjoyed this particular edition of The Gist, and I look forward to seeing you again. Till then, this is Ramananda Sengupta signing out.